Veller stood near the observation window of the Galactic Assembly Station, watching the latest ship arrive. Vessel was small and awkward-looking, compared to the sleek craft of the other species. Its hull showed scorch marks from what must have been a difficult journey through jump space. This was humanity's first diplomatic ship, and it looked like it barely survived the trip. They call themselves humans, her assistant said, glancing at the data pad from a world called Earth, third planet in a yellow star system on the outer rim. Velshara nodded slowly. Her people, the Krellians, had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Her scales carried the deep purple color that showed her age and wisdom. She had seen many species come to the assembly, all hoping to find their place among the great civilizations. Most learned quickly that the galaxy was not kind to newcomers. The human delegation walked into the assembly hall. An hour later, Velshara watched them carefully. They moved with confidence, which surprised her. Most new species entered with their heads down, overwhelmed by the ancient powers around them, but these humans looked around with open curiosity, even smiling at some of the stranger alien forms. Their leader was a man named Jake Morrison. He had dark hair, touched with gray and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He wore a simple blue uniform with a small flag patch on the shoulder. When he spoke to the assembly, his voice was steady. "We come in peace," Morrison said. "Earth seeks friendship and trade with all species willing to meet us as equals." A low rumble of clicking sounds came from the Vextari section. That was laughter, though it sounded nothing like human laughter. High Executive Tharwin rose from his seat. He was massive, standing nearly 3 m tall, with gray skin like stone and eyes that glowed red. His species had conquered dozens of worlds and controlled a third of known space. "Equals," Tharwin's voice boomed through the hall. "You barely possess jump drive technology. Your weapons are primitive. Your world has not even unified under one government. What could you possibly offer that would make you our equals?" Morrison met his gaze without flinching. "Respect, honest dealing, and the knowledge that we will not kneel to anyone, no matter how powerful they claim to be." The assembly fell silent. No one spoke to the Vexari that way. Velshara felt her secondary heart skip a beat. This human either had great courage or no understanding of how much danger he was in. Tharwin stepped forward. "Then let me be clear, human. The Vexari Empire claims all systems within 50 light years of your Earth. You will pay tribute. You will allow our ships to use your stations. You will provide resources when we demand them. This is not negotiable." Morrison looked back at his small delegation. There was a woman with dark skin and sharp eyes, Dr. Amy Chen, their science advisor. She nodded slightly. Morrison turned back to face Tharwin. "No," he said. "Simply, we didn't cross the stars to kneel." The assembly erupted in noise. Dozens of species began speaking at once in their various languages. Translation systems struggled to keep up. Velshara watched as several ambassadors moved away from the human delegation, as if their defiance might be contagious and dangerous. Tharwin's eyes blazed brighter. "Then your species has chosen extinction. The Empire will visit your world within the month. You will learn the price of defiance." Morrison nodded slowly. "Then we and LT Unc and GT LL be waiting." The human Delegation left the hall. Velshara expected them to rush to their ship and flee back to Earth to prepare their defenses. Instead, she noticed something odd. Over the next several days, the humans were meeting with other species. Not the powerful ones, but the small delegations that usually sat in the back of the assembly hall and never spoke. She watched Morrison share a meal with the Dreen, a species of small insect beings whose home world was strip-mined by the Vexus Tauri. She saw Dr. Chen in deep conversation with the Yardok, whose population had been howled by the Empire and Unk and GT's expansion. The humans were talking to everyone the great powers ignored. On the fifth day, Velshara found herself approached by Dr. Chen in one of the station's gardens. Ambassador Velshara, Chen said with a slight bow, "May I speak with you?" "I am not sure that is wise," Velshara replied. "My people have managed to avoid the Vex Tari and Unk and GT full attention by staying neutral. Being seen with you might change that." Chen smiled sadly. "Your people have stayed neutral by giving the Empire whatever it wants. Last year they took 3 of your mining colonies. The year before they demanded access to your medical research. How long before neutrality cost you everything?" Velshara's scales rippled with agitation. "What would you have us do? Fight?" "Maybe," Chen said, "or maybe not. The Vex Tari are strong because everyone believes they're unbeatable. But what if that's wrong? What if the only reason they keep winning is because everyone fights them alone? You have one world and a handful of ships," Velara said. "The Empire has hundreds of worlds and thousands of warships. The mathematics are clear. The mathematics of courage are different than the mathematics of power," Chen replied. "We're an Unk and GT, not asking you to fight with us, not yet. We're an Unk and GT, just asking you to remember that there was once a time when your people chose their own path. Don't you want that again?" Shara said nothing. Chen bowed again and walked away. That night, Velshara accessed the historical records of her people. She read about the wars they had fought for independence centuries ago. She read about the Cryan warriors who stood against impossible odds because some things mattered more than survival. When had her people forgotten that? The next morning, the human ship prepared to depart. Velshara went to the docking bay. Morrison was there overseeing the final preparations. "Captain Morrison," she said, "when the Empire comes for you, what will you do?" Morrison looked at her with those steady eyes. "We'll fight. We'll probably lose, but we'll make them remember that Earth stood free." "And if others joined you?" Velshara asked quietly. "If you were not alone?" Morrison smiled. "Then maybe we'd have a chance, but I won't ask others to die for Earth's choices." "Perhaps," Veller said carefully. She walked away before Morrison could respond. Behind her, she heard him say something to Dr. Chen, but the words were lost in the station's ambient noise. Shara returned to her quarters and sent a private message to the Krelian High Council. She told them everything. She told them about the humans' defiance and their conversations with the minor species. She told them about her own doubts. The response came quickly. "Maintain neutrality. Do not provoke the Empire. Survival must come first." But that night Velshara dreamed of the old Cryan legends. She dreamed of warriors who chose honor over survival, and when she woke she wondered if survival without honor was Worth the price her people had paid. Humans left the station, the assembly. Returned to normal, but something had changed. Velshara felt it in the way the minor species looked at each other. Now she felt it in the quiet conversations happening in corners and gardens. The humans had planted a seed. Now they would see if anything grew from it, and the Vixari Empire was coming. 6 months had passed since the humans left the assembly station. Velshara had heard nothing from Earth in that time. The silence worried her more than she wanted to admit. Perhaps the Vextari had already crushed them. Perhaps the brave words in the assembly hall had died, along with the humans who spoke them. Then the news came that changed everything. The Vextari had attacked a Kralian colony world called Taurus 4th. Not conquered it, just attacked it. Their ships had bombarded 3 cities from orbit, killing thousands. Then left. It was a message. The Empire was testing to see if anyone would respond. The Kralian High Council met for 3 days. Shara was called to attend. She watched as the military leaders presented their analysis. Fighting the Empire would mean total war. The Kralian fleet might win a few battles, but eventually the Empire's greater numbers would overwhelm them. The math was brutal and clear. We must protest through the assembly, the High Speaker said. We will demand sanctions against the Empire. Velshara felt something cold settle in her chest. What would you have us do? The High Speaker asked. Throw away millions more lives in a war we cannot win. Shara had no answer. The council voted. The Kralian Conqueror would issue a formal protest and ask the assembly to intervene. Everyone knew the assembly would do nothing. The Vextari were too powerful. Fear kept the galaxy silent, but someone else was not silent. The message came 2 days after the council's decision. It was broadcast to every government channel. A human face appeared on the screens, a man with sharp features and calculating eyes. He wore a dark blue uniform with gold trim. This is Commander Ben Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet, he said. We have learned of the attack on Taurus 4th. We are coming to help. Velara could hardly believe what she was hearing. The humans were coming here to fight the Empire. The Kralian High Council immediately tried to contact the human fleet to tell them not to come. It was too late. Hayes and his ships were already in jump space heading toward Kralian territory. Velshara pulled up the data on the human fleet. 5 ships. They were sending 5 ships against an empire that could bring hundreds. She felt a mix of admiration and grief. The humans were brave, but they were also about to die. Commander Hayes arrived at Terrace IV 3 days later. Velshara was there too, sent by the High Council to coordinate with the humans. She watched from the Kralian command station as the human ships took up defensive positions around the battered colony. Hayes contacted her directly. His face appeared on her screen and she saw no fear there, only focus. Ambassador Veller, he said, good to meet you, even under these circumstances. What's the situation? The Vextari will return, she said. Our intelligence suggests they are gathering a task force, at least 20 warships. Commander, you cannot win this fight. Hayes smiled slightly. Maybe not, but we can make it expensive. For them, that's a start. Why are you doing this? Velara asked. This is not your world, not your people. No, Hayes agreed. But the Empire came for you because they thought no one would care. We're here to prove them wrong. Vexari returned 6 days later with 18 warships. Valera watched the tactical displays with Elder Morph, the Kralian military commander. Morph was old, his scales faded to almost white. He had fought in wars before the humans even had space flight. They fight strangely, Morph said, watching the human ships move. Not like any doctrine I know. The humans didn't form battle lines like other species. They darted in and out, attacking and retreating. They used the asteroid field near Terrace 4 as cover, forcing the larger Vex Terry ships into disadvantageous positions. When a human ship was damaged, the others covered it while it fell back to repair. And they never ever abandoned the civilian evacuation shuttles. Valera watched as one of Hayes's ships, a vessel called the Defiant, positioned itself between 3 Vex's Tari cruisers and a convoy of refugee transports. The human ship took terrible damage. Its shields failed. Hull breaches appeared along its side. But it didn't move. It stayed there, firing until the transports reached safety. Get those civilians clear, she heard Hayes shouting over the comm channels. All ships cover the transports. We hold the line. The battle raged for hours. The humans were being destroyed piece by piece. 2 of their 5 ships were crippled. The rest were badly damaged, but they had done something impossible. They had held the Vexari fleet in place. Then something unexpected happened. A new group of ships dropped out of jump space. They were Dreen vessels, small but fast. Then came the yard talk. Their ships old but still functional. 3 other minor species followed, the same species the humans had talked to at the assembly all those months ago. This is Captain Zixter of the Dryken Free Fleet, a voice said. Over the open channel, we stand with the humans, we stand with the Kralians. We will not run anymore. The Vexari suddenly faced not 5 ships but 30. The mathematics had changed. The Empire commander made a decision had never seen before. He ordered his fleet to retreat. The Vexari Empire had retreated. For the first time in decades, someone had made them back down. The combined fleet stayed at Terrace 4 for 2 weeks helping with rescue operations. Veller worked alongside human engineers as they helped rebuild damaged infrastructure. She watched Hayes and his crew work 18-hour shifts pulling survivors from collapsed buildings, distributing medical supplies, playing with Kralian children who had lost their homes. One evening she found Hayes sitting alone looking at a data pad. She approached carefully. What are you reading? She asked. Hayes looked up. Casualty reports. We lost 43 people in the battle. The Defiance Captain Katie Rodriguez, she didn't make it. Neither did most of her crew. They saved thousands of crons. Velshara said quietly. I know, Hayes said. I just wish the price wasn't so high. Shara sat down beside him. Commander, why did you really come? Your world is far from here. You could have stayed safe. Hayes was quiet for a moment because someone had to. Because if we didn't, then what's the point of reaching the stars just to become another species that looks away when people need help? He shook his head. Earth has a lot of problems. We've made a lot of mistakes, but we learned something important. Being powerful doesn't matter if you don't stand for anything. The Vextari will not forget this, Velshara warned. They will see Earth as an enemy now. They already did. Hayes said the difference is now we have friends. Shara made her decision in that moment she sent a message to the High Council knowing it might end her career. She told them that the Krellian Concordat must choose a side. They could keep hiding behind neutrality, watching their colonies burn one by one, or they could stand with those who had fought. For them, the response came faster than she expected. The High Speaker himself appeared on her screen. The Council has voted, he said. We have been cowards long enough. The Krellian Concordat stands with Earth and all who defend the free worlds. Let the Empire hear this. We will run no more. Velshara felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. She went to find Hayes to tell him the news. She found him with his crew sharing food with Krellian soldiers. They were laughing together despite not speaking the same language, using hand gestures and expressions. She watched them and understood something important. This was not just about one battle or one colony. The humans had started something that could not be stopped. They had reminded the galaxy that courage was not about being the strongest. It was about being willing to stand up when others would not. Other species were watching. Other species were remembering what it felt like to choose their own path. The Vixari Empire was still vast and powerful, but for the first time in a long time it looked less invincible. And in the command center of the Krellian station, Velshara stood with Commander Hayes and Elder Morph, looking at the star charts. They began planning not for surrender but for resistance. The real war was just beginning, but now they would face it together. 1 year had changed everything. Velshara walked through the halls of the new coalition headquarters, a station built from the combined efforts of 12 different species. The walls showed artwork from different worlds, Cranian honor tapestries hung beside human paintings, and dream crystal sculptures. The air recyclers had been adjusted to accommodate the breathing needs of all the species who worked here. This was the Free Worlds Coalition, and it had grown beyond anyone's expectations. She entered the main strategy room where the Coalition Council was gathering. Ambassador Lisa Park from Earth was already there, reviewing reports on her data pad. Park was younger than Morrison, with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped working. She had become the chief architect of the coalition's expansion, bringing in new members through careful diplomacy. Ambassador Velshara, Park said with a smile, I was hoping you'd arrive early. We need to discuss the Talvin situation. The Talvin were another species considering joining the coalition, but they were nervous. The Vixari Empire had noticed the coalition's growth and were applying pressure on any world that showed interest in joining. They are afraid, Shara said, and they have reason to be. Fear is what the Empire counts on, Park replied. We need to show the Talon that joining us makes them safer, not more vulnerable. Before Velshara could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. A voice came over the speakers. All personnel to defensive positions. Vexari fleet detected, entering system. The council members rushed to the command center. General Chris Dalton was already there, the human military commander who led the coalition's combined forces. Beside him stood a figure that still made many species uncomfortable. Zekler, a former Vixari officer who had defected to the coalition, report Park said, arriving at Dalton's side, 1 Vixari dreadnought and 6 support ships. Dalton said, They're not an attack formation, looks like a diplomatic mission, but armed enough to remind us they're serious. Vexter ship stopped at the edge of weapons range. A communication request came through on the main screen. Appeared High Executor Tharwin himself. He looked even more imposing than Velshar remembered from the assembly hall a year ago. I speak to the so-called Free Worlds Coalition, Tharwin began. You have gathered 12 species. Under your banner, you have interfered. In Imperial territory, you have harbored defectors and rebels. This ends now. Graham Park stepped forward. High Executor, we have not interfered in Imperial territory. We have defended our own member worlds from unprovoked attacks. There is a difference. You have 3 days to disband this coalition. Tharwin continued as if she had not spoken. All member species will acknowledge Imperial authority. All military forces will disperse. If you comply, we will show mercy. If you refuse, we will demonstrate what happens to those who challenge the Empire. The screen went dark. Silence filled the command center. 3 days, Dalton said quietly. That's not much time. It's not meant to be, Zeckler said. His voice still carried the harsh tones of his species, but there was sadness in it. The High Executive is gathering forces. This is not a negotiation. It is a declaration. Park looked at the assembled council members. We need to vote. Does the coalition disband or do we stand? The vote was quick and unanimous. Every species chose to stand. That night Velshara found Park working late in her office, writing something on her personal terminal. You should rest, Velshara said. The next days will be difficult. Park looked up and smiled tiredly. I'm preparing something, a message to the Empire. Diplomatic proposal, Velshara asked. Not to Tharwin, Park said. To the people of the Empire, to every world under Vex Terry control. She turned the screen so Velshara could see. It was a broadcast, carefully written in simple language that could be translated into hundreds of tongues. People of the Empire, it began. You have been told that the Free Worlds Coalition is a rebellion that threatens order, but we are not rebels. We are free beings who choose to stand together rather than kneel separately. We offer every world the same choice. Join us in freedom or remain in chains. The choice is yours. You are broadcasting this to the entire Empire. Velshara asked, amazed. Every world, every station, every ship. Park confirmed. We're not just fighting the Empire's military, we're fighting the idea that the Empire is inevitable. If we can show people there's another way, the High Executive will see this as a declaration of war. Velara said it is. Park agreed. But wars aren't just fought with ships and weapons, they're fought with ideas, and our idea is simple, that every being deserves to choose their own path. The broadcast went out the next day. Within hours, responses started coming back. Some were angry, accusing the coalition of trying to destroy order. But others were different. Messages came from workers on industrial worlds, from scientists in research stations, from soldiers in the Imperial fleet. They all asked the same question: is freedom really possible? Then the rebellion started. 3 worlds in the outer rim of the Empire declared independence. 2 Imperial governors were overthrown by their own people. An entire battle group defected, their crews no longer willing to fight for an empire that gave them nothing but demands. Tharwin's Response was swift and brutal. He sent fleets to crush the rebellions. The massive war fleet he had been gathering was broken into smaller groups, each sent to deal with a different crisis in the coalition. Command Center, General Dalton watched the reports with grim satisfaction. He stretched thin, Dalton said, but that makes him more dangerous, not less. A cornered enemy fights harder than we. Must be ready. Shara said. The coalition spent the next weeks preparing. Ships from all 12 species gathered at strategic points. Human engineers worked with Cryon technicians to upgrade weapon systems. Dryan scouts mapped Imperial fleet movements. Everyone contributed what they could. Shara spent time with the Kralian military units that would fight in the coming battle. She was surprised to find humans training alongside them. A young human sergeant named Ryan Ward was teaching Cranian pilots human fighter tactics. You fly like you're trying to prove you're the best, Ward was saying to a group of Kralian pilots. That's fine in peacetime. In combat, all that matters is coming home alive. Stay with your wingmate, cover each other, no heroic solo runs. One of the Kralian pilots, a young warrior named Ka, asked, "Is that how humans fight, always together?" Ward smiled. "We learned a long time ago that humans alone are easy to kill, but humans together, that's a different story." After the training session, Velshara approached Ward. "You are preparing them well." Locke, trying to Ward, said, "This is going to be bad, Ambassador. The Empire is coming with everything they have. A lot of good people are going to die. Then why do you keep smiling when you train them?" Veller asked. Ward's smile faded a bit but didn't disappear. "Because fear doesn't help anyone. If I can teach them to trust each other, to know they're not alone out there, then maybe a few more come home. That's worth smiling about." Shara watched the pilots, human and Kralon, together practicing maneuvers. They moved as one unit now, each watching out for the others. She thought about how much had changed in 1 year. A year ago, her people stood alone, afraid to even speak against the Empire. Now they trained alongside humans, preparing to fight for something they had almost forgotten: the right to choose their own future. The message came 3 weeks after Tharwin's ultimatum. The High Executive had crushed most of the rebellions in Imperial space. Now he was bringing the full weight of his remaining fleet against the Coalition. 200 warships were heading toward Coalition space, the largest battle fleet assembled in a generation. The Coalition had 60 ships. Park called an emergency council meeting. Every species representative was there, their faces showing the strain of the news. "We cannot win a straight fight, General," Dalton said bluntly. "The numbers are too far against us. Then we don't fight straight," Park said. She looked at Zekler. "You know how the Empire thinks. How do we beat them?" Zekler was quiet for a long moment. "You don't beat the Empire with numbers. You beat them by making them doubt. The High Executive believes in inevitable victory. If we can show him that victory is not inevitable, we make him hesitate." Velara finished. "We make him question." The council worked through the night planning their defense. They would make their stand at Sigma Reach, a system with asteroid fields and nebula clouds that would limit the effectiveness of large fleet formations. As dawn approached on the station's artificial cycle, Shara stood with Park at an observation window. watching the coalition fleet assemble. "Are we doing the right thing?" Shara asked quietly. "So many will die." Park was silent for a moment. "My grandfather once told me that freedom isn't free." I never really understood what he meant until now, but I know this: living on your knees isn't really living. Whatever happens, we chose to stand. To stand with humans is to be remembered, Veller said softly, repeating a phrase she had heard spreading among the coalition species. Park smiled and, "Esteemed beyond empires, let's make sure that memory is worth the price." The coalition fleet departed for Sigma Reach. The battle that would decide the galaxy's future was coming. The battle of Sigma Reach began at dawn, though there was no real dawn in deep space. Velshara stood on the bridge of the Krellian flagship, watching the tactical displays as 200 Vexari warships emerged. From jump space, they came in waves, their formation perfect and intimidating. The sight of so many warships in one place made Veller's heart skip. This was the power of an empire that had ruled for centuries. This was what they were standing against. "All ships hold positions," came Admiral Jake Morrison's voice over the fleet channel. The human captain had been promoted to lead all coalition forces. His voice was calm, almost casual. "Remember the plan. We're not here to die, we're here to win." The coalition fleet was spread across the Sigma Reach system, using the asteroid fields and nebula clouds for cover. 60 ships against 200. The mathematics were brutal. The Vexari fleet moved forward in their standard formation, a massive wall of firepower designed to overwhelm any defense. But as they entered the asteroid field, the coalition ship struck. Human fighters, small and fast, darted from behind asteroids. They fired missiles and immediately retreated. Krallian cruisers emerged from the nebula, fired their plasma cannons, and disappeared back into the clouds. Dryan ships, tiny but equipped with powerful torpedoes, swarmed around the larger Imperial vessels. The Vextari responded with overwhelming firepower, but they were hitting asteroids and empty space. The coalition refused to stand and fight. They attacked and vanished, attacked and vanished. "They're getting frustrated," Zekler said from his station. "The high executive will change tactics soon." He was right. 15 minutes into the battle, the Imperial fleet split into smaller groups, each one pursuing different coalition units. They were trying to pin down and destroy the coalition ships one by one. "Here it comes," Morrison said. "All ships phase 2, draw them deeper." The coalition ships continued to retreat, leading the Imperial groups deeper into the system. The Vextari pursued, confident in their superior numbers. Then the trap closed. The asteroid fields weren't natural. Coalition engineers had seeded them with mines and explosives. As the Imperial ships pursued through the asteroids, detonations erupted. Around them, shields flared, holes cracked. The perfect Imperial formations broke apart. Now Morrison ordered all ships counterattack. The entire coalition fleet converged on the scattered Imperial groups. For the first time, they had local superiority. 3 coalition ships against 1 Imperial vessel. The tide of battle shifted, but the Vexari were experienced warriors. They regrouped quickly, their larger ships forming protective circles. The battle became a grinding slugfest. Ship against ship, will against will. Velshara watched as a human destroyer, called the Defiant, commanded by Captain Katie Rodriguez, positioned itself to defend a damaged Kralian cruiser. 3. Imperial ships focused their fire on the Defiant. Its shields collapsed. Explosions rippled along its hull. Defiant, fall back, Morrison's voice called out, "You've done enough." Rodriguez's response was steady despite the alarms blaring in her background. "Negative, Admiral. The Kralian ship has wounded aboard. I'm not leaving them." The Defiant continued to fire, its weapons still operational despite the damage, but everyone watching knew it couldn't last. The ship was dying, Katie, Morrison said. And for the first time, Velshara heard emotion crack his calm voice. "Please, tell Earth we held the line," Rodriguez said. Defiant out, the human ship accelerated directly toward the Vixari flagship, the massive dreadnought that carried High Executive Tharquin. It was a suicide run, and everyone knew it, but Rodriguez's intention was clear. She was going to hurt them on her way out. The Defiant smashed into the dreadnought's engine section at full velocity. The explosion was visible across the entire battlefield, a brief star that lit up the darkness. When the light faded, the Vixari flagship was crippled, its main engines destroyed, and the Defiant was gone. Silence fell across the fleet channels for just a moment, then a crayon captain's voice broke through. "For the Defiant, all ships forward." The Kralian battle group charged directly at the Imperial center, covering the gap Rodriguez had created. The battle became chaos, ships from dozens of worlds throwing themselves at the Imperial fleet with a fury born of grief and determination. Velshara saw it happening across the displays. Species that had been neutral for years were dropping out of jump space to join the fight. Even some Vextari ships were breaking formation, their crews refusing to fire on the coalition forces. On one of the Imperial vessels, a mutiny broke out. The crew had watched Rodriguez sacrifice herself to save people who weren't even her species. They couldn't fight against that kind of courage anymore. The mutinous ship broadcast a message. "This is the crew of the Imperial cruiser Vengeance. We will not fight for an empire built on fear. We stand with the coalition." End quote. More ships defected. The iron certainty of the Imperial fleet began to crack. High Executive Tharquin's face appeared on the main display, broadcast to all ships in the system. His expression was one of rage and disbelief. "This is treason," he shouted. "I am your High Executive. Obey." But something had broken in his fleet. The crews had seen too much sacrifice, too much courage from beings they were supposed to see as inferior. They couldn't unsee it. Then a single shot came from inside Tharquin's own flagship, from a Vixari officer who had seen enough. The broadcast cut to static. Imperial fleet lost all coordination. Some ships continued to fight, others fled, still others joined the coalition. The battle that should have been a one-sided slaughter became a coalition victory, but at a terrible cost. When the guns finally fell silent 12 hours later, the Sigma Reach system was filled with debris. 60 coalition ships had become 35. Thousands were dead, among them Katie Rodriguez and her entire crew. The Dream had lost half their fleet. The Krillins had suffered heavy casualties, but the Vextari Empire was broken. Their fleet was scattered, their High Executive dead, their authority shattered. Shara found Admiral Morrison in the aftermath, Standing alone in the memorial hall of the Coalition Station, he was looking at a wall where names were being added. The names of everyone who died at Sigma Reach. Katie Rodriguez's name was there. Along with her crew, beside them were Krellian warriors, Dryan pilots, and soldiers from a dozen other species. Will they remember? Velara asked. Quietly, the same question she had asked before. Morrison didn't look away from the wall. They'll remember all of us. Every name, every sacrifice, that's what we're building here. Velshara, a galaxy that remembers. The price was high, she said. It always is, Morrison replied. But look at what they bought with that price: freedom for billions, an empire brought down not by a stronger empire, but by people who refused to kneel. Katie knew what she was doing. They all did. Velar stepped closer to the wall, reading the names. So many lives, so many species, all united by one simple idea that some things were worth fighting for. The high executive's last words were to call it treason, she said. He could not understand why his own people would turn against him, because he never understood that fear only works until someone shows. There's another option, Morrison said. Katie showed them, we all showed them. And now the galaxy knows. News of the battle spread across known space. Within days, the Vexari Empire collapsed into civil war as world after world declared independence. The species that had stood with the Coalition were suddenly the most respected voices in galactic affairs. The Krellian Concordat, once a minor power that barely survived by staying neutral, was now at the center of the new order. A phrase began spreading across the galaxy, translate into hundreds of languages: to stand with humans is to be remembered and esteemed beyond empires. It wasn't just about the battle, it was about the choice to stand when others would not. It was about the honor of fighting beside beings who valued courage over power. Velara stood in the memorial hall. Long after Morrison left, she touched the wall where Katie Rodriguez's name was carved. The human had saved a Krellian ship and its crew. She had never met any of them. They were strangers from another world, but she had given her life for them anyway. That was the gift humanity had given the galaxy. Not superior technology or greater weapons, but the simple, powerful idea that strangers could become family. That courage could be contagious, that standing together was worth any price. The memorial hall filled with others. As the night went on, Krellin stood beside humans. Dreen mourned with Yardo. Species that had feared each other for centuries now shared their grief and their hope. Velar watched them and thought about what came next. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. They had torn down an empire. Now they had to build something better. But as she looked at the faces around her, human and alien, united in their loss and their determination, she felt certain of one thing: whatever they built, it would be worth remembering. 20 years had passed since the Battle of Sigma Reach. Velshara stood at the observation deck of Unity Station, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. The station orbited a neutral moon that had become the heart of the new galactic assembly. Unlike the old assembly, which served the interests of empires, this one represented individual worlds. 300 species had signed the Coalition charter, and more joined every year. Her scales had faded to a pale purple now, showing her advanced age, but her eyes were still sharp and her mind sharper. Still, she had lived to see her people transformed from neutral bystanders to honored leaders in galactic affairs. The Krellian conquered now sat at the very center of the new order, not through conquest but through the simple fact that they had stood with humanity when it mattered. Ambassador General Velshara, a voice said behind her. She turned to see a young human woman in a crisp blue uniform. I'm Captain Maya Santos. I wanted to introduce myself before the ceremony. Velara studied the young captain. She looked to be in her late 20s with dark hair and eyes that held both determination and kindness. On her wrist was a silver bracelet engraved with a name, Katie Rodriguez. You wear her memory, Velar said, gesturing to the bracelet. Maya touched it gently. My mother served with Captain Rodriguez. She survived Sigma Reach, but she never forgot what Rodriguez did. This bracelet reminds me why I joined the Explorer Corps, to honor those who made it possible. The Explorer Corps, Velara said with a smile. Admiral Morrison's final project before retirement. How is the old warrior teaching at the academy? Maya said. He claims he's too old for space travel now, but I think he just likes corrupting the next generation with his unconventional tactics. Velara laughed, a sound like crystal chimes. He always did prefer to teach by breaking the rules. Come walk with me. The ceremony doesn't begin for another hour. They walked through Unity Station together. The corridors were busy with beings from dozens of species, all working together. A human engineer was helping a Vextari technician repair power relay. A group of Cryon students listened to a Dryan professor explain quantum mechanics. This mixing of species would have been impossible 20 years ago. Do you know why they call it Unity Station? Velara asked. Because it represents the unity of free worlds. Maya guessed. That's what people think. Velara said, but the name comes from something Admiral Morrison said when they were designing it. He said, we're not building a station for unity. We're building a station because of unity. It's subtle but important. Unity isn't the goal, it's the foundation. Quote. They reached the memorial wing of the station. The walls were covered in names, just like the memorial hall on the old Coalition station, but there were so many more now. Every being who had fallen in the fight for freedom was listed here, regardless of species. 60,000 names, Maya said softly. I've read about Sigma Reach, studied the tactics, analyzed every decision, but seeing all these names, it makes it real good. Belcher said. History should feel real. These weren't just tactical decisions or strategic sacrifices. They were people with families, dreams, fears. They gave everything so we could have this. She gestured to the bustling station around them. A young Kralian approached them, barely more than a hatchling by crayon standards, but old enough to serve in the military. She wore the uniform of the Combined Defense Fleet, which now drew from all member species. Ambassador General, the young Kralian said with a respectful bow. I'm Lieutenant Krisha. I serve aboard Captain Santos's ship. Velar and LT Uncan GT's eyes widened. Krisha, you're Kirsch's daughter, granddaughter. Actually, the young Cronian said with pride, my grandmother speaks of you often. She said you were the one who first believed humans could teach us something worth learning. Your grandmother was one of the first Kralian pilots trained by humans, Velar said, remembering she learned from Ryan Ward. If I recall correctly. Yes, Krisha confirmed. Instructor Ward retired 5 Years ago, but grandmother still visits. Him, they trade stories about the old days. Maya smiled. Instructor Ward trained me too, best pilot in the fleet, and he made sure everyone knew that proper flying meant never leaving your wingmate behind. He learned that from humans, Krisha said, and taught it to my grandmother, and she taught it to me. That's how the best lessons work. They get passed down. The three of them walked to the observation deck where the ceremony would take place. The deck overlooked the memorial moon below, where a massive monument had been built. It was visible from orbit, a towering structure of crystal and metal that caught the light of the system's sun and scattered it into rainbows. The monument, to those who stood, Shara said, we dedicated it on the 10th anniversary of Sigma Reach. Every species contributed to its construction. If you look closely, you can see the different architectural styles all woven together. It's beautiful, Maya said. It's necessary, Velara corrected gently. We must remember what freedom cost. Otherwise, we might forget why it matters. The ceremony began an hour later. Representatives from 300 worlds gathered to mark the 20th anniversary of the Battle of Sigma Reach. Velshara was the keynote speaker, a role she had not asked for but could not refuse. She stood before the assembled beings and looked out at the diversity of faces, human and Kran, Dreen and reformed. Vexari, species that had once been enemies now standing together. 20 years ago, Velara began. I stood in the Galactic Assembly and watched a human captain tell the most powerful empire in known space that Earth would not kneel. I thought he was brave. I thought he was foolish. I was right about both. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. My people were ancient when humanity first looked to the stars. We had seen empires rise and fall. We thought we understood how the galaxy worked. The strong dominated, the weak submitted. That was the natural order. Velshara paused, letting her words settle. The humans taught us that there is nothing natural about such an order. They showed us that courage is not about being the strongest, it's about standing up when others will not. They reminded us that we had forgotten our own history, the stories of when Krellians fought for their freedom instead of accepting chains. She looked directly at the human delegation. But this is not a story about humans saving the galaxy. It's a story about what happens when someone is brave enough to stand first. Katie Rodriguez didn't die for humanity. She died defending a Krallian ship full of people she'd never met. That act rippled across the galaxy. It inspired others to be brave, to remember that some things matter more than survival. Veller's voice grew stronger. Today, a phrase is spoken across 300 worlds in 1,000 languages. To stand with humans is to be remembered and esteemed beyond empires. Some think it means humans are special, but the truth is more powerful than that. Humans are not special. What's special is what they showed us about ourselves. She gestured to the memorial moon below. Every name on that monument chose to stand for something. They chose courage over comfort. They chose freedom over safety, and in choosing they became part of something greater than any empire. They became part of a legacy that will outlast stars. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Vextari Empire is gone, Velera continued, but the lesson remains. Power fades, empires crumble, but the choice to stand for what is right, that echoes forever. The species that stood with humans are honored not because we were powerful but because we were willing. That willingness transformed us from subjects of empire into architects of freedom. She looked at Maya Santos and Keisha standing together. Look at our young ones. They serve together on ships that fly under no single species flag. They defend worlds they've never seen, protecting people they'll never meet. They learned this not from conquest or domination, but from the example of those who came before. Velara's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but in the silent hall everyone heard, we were given a gift 20 years ago, not advanced technology or superior weapons. We were given the gift of remembering what it means to be free, to choose our own path, to stand together not because we must but because we choose to. She straightened her old scales, catching the light. So when we say to stand with humans is to be remembered and esteemed beyond empires, we're not talking about one species. We're talking about a choice, the choice to stand, the choice to remember, the choice to believe that what we do matters. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for the fallen, followed by a traditional Krillian honor song that had been taught to other species. Hundreds of voices from dozens of worlds sang together in imperfect harmony. Afterward, Velshara found herself approached by an elderly human man in a civilian suit. It took her a moment to recognize him, Admiral Jake Morrison, now retired, his hair completely white. That was a good speech, Morrison said with his characteristic slight smile. I spoke the truth, Velara replied. You humans did change everything. We started something, Morrison corrected, but it took all of us to finish it, and it's not finished yet, probably never will be. They stood together watching Maya Santos and Keisha prepare for departure. The young captain was giving final instructions to her mixed species crew. Where is she going? Shara asked. Deep space exploration, Morrison said. They're mapping systems beyond known space, looking for new worlds, new species to invite to the assembly. Dangerous work, Velara observed. The best kind, Morrison said. They're not conquering or claiming. They're exploring and inviting. That's the difference between an empire and what we built. Maya's ship, a sleek vessel that combined human, Krellian, and Dryan technology, began its departure sequence. As it pulled away from the station, Velshara saw its name painted on the hull, the Defiant 2. She named it after Rodriguez's ship. Morrison said softly, some names deserve to keep flying. She's right, Velshara said. They watched the ship jump to hyperspace, carrying its mixed crew into the unknown. Velshara thought about everything that had changed since that first meeting in the assembly. Her people had gone from frightened neutrals to confident partners in shaping the galaxy's future. And all because they had chosen to stand with humans when others would not. Jake, she said, using his first name for perhaps the first time. Thank you. Morrison looked at her with curiosity. For what? For being foolish enough to stand against the Empire, she said. For being brave enough to believe it mattered, for showing us that we were capable of more than we thought. Morrison smiled. We just did what seemed right. The rest of you did the hard part, choosing to believe freedom was possible. As the sun set on the memorial moon below, casting long shadows across the monument to those who stood, Velshara thought about legacy, not the legacy of empires built on conquest, but the legacy of choice, courage, and standing together in schools across 300 worlds. Young beings of every species learned the same history. They learned about the Battle of Sigma Reach. They learned about Katie Rodriguez and the Defiant. They learned about the moment the galaxy remembered what freedom meant, but most importantly, they learned that heroism wasn't about being special. It was about choosing to stand when standing mattered, and that was a lesson that would outlast any empire the galaxy had ever known.